new to our committee. And then we'll have you introduce yourself and the topic and the information. So we'll start with Senator Gulick.
Oh, hello, Senator Gulick, the one who wants that file cabinet gone. Chittenden Central Senator, I live in Burlington. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks.
Good morning, Dave Weeks, represent Rutland County, come from Proctor.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Ginny Lang, Chittenden Southeast.
Terry Williams, Rutland County, live in Portland.
Good morning, I'm Ruth Hardy from the Addison District.
Good morning, thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Alex Farrell. I'm the commissioner over at the Department of Housing and Community Development. Prior to that, I've been deputy commissioner for a couple years. If it's okay, I'd just like to introduce, I brought with me a colleague, the director of our housing division, Sean Gilpin. Been in that role for
10 years.
10 years. So he's the expert here.
So do you have some prepared information for us? Do we have anything online from you, first of all?
I believe we
Okay, I
do.
think
So we
sent
sent
something in, yeah.
We sent two PDFs, two one-pagers. So what we'll share today, and we'll transition over to Commissioner Winters in a moment, but we'd like to start out by talking about two programs, the VHIP, the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, and then we'll talk about MERV, the Manufactured Housing Improvement and Repair Program. These are both part of our longer-term strategy to help folks leaving coordinated entry find permanent housing and to strengthen the existing housing stock, both by rehabbing units and by bringing new units online. So just some highlights on the on VHIP. I don't know if
Do you want to pull it up?
yeah, are we able to pull that one pager up?
Yeah, I should be.
The visual is much more,
It's nice.
much better
It's
than
really
my
nice.
voice.
Beautiful.
Well, that's Sean and his team, so.
I hope Beverly Bogat has found a chair. We should get another chair.
Oh,
I'm so sure I can, Rick.
I can take a knee.
yeah, that's true. Plenty of space.
Yeah.
It's always harder to do these things with a room full of people watching, isn't it?
Mhm.
Almost there. Here we go. We're doing that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's us, okay. So just to talk about the program a bit right off the bat, this started with CRF funds before it was VHIP as we know it now, but the premise is that it rehabilitates units or can convert spaces, commercial retail spaces, or chop up an existing home, say a single family home, into multiple units. So as you can imagine, it's incredibly cost effective. While right now a lot of the new units that we're funding are coming in, Jeff dodged the chair.
Doing the dance, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. While a lot of the new units that we're funding are costing $450,000, $500,000, sometimes $600,000, the units that we're funding through VHIP, the grants are averaging a little over $30,000. You can see about $38,000 here. What's also great about this is not only do the dollars go far, but it's a quicker way to bring units online. So we're typically seeing units through VHIP coming online in a matter of months, less than a year, so 6 months, 7 months, which is a drastic difference from new construction projects, which will take you anywhere from 2, 3, sometimes 5 years. And so in this case, we're bringing units online very cheap, so under 40K per unit, and very quickly. Now you can see since 2020, and if we're including the CRF funded units, in addition to the VHIP units, 527 units have been brought online. Vast majority of these dedicated to folks leaving coordinated entry. So this is a key part of our strategy to make sure there's permanent housing for folks as they leave the GA program and go to the coordinated entry elsewhere. As of right now, we as of mid-November, which we get our reporting from the nonprofits that administer this on a quarterly basis. So as of mid-November, the pipeline for units that are in progress is 331 units. And this is a steady pipeline that will continue to refill. We have a fair amount of funding right now. It will go fast. There's tremendous demand. And we are making a switch over, spending down the last of the ARPA dollars and switching over to state general funds. But this has been a tremendously successful program. Before we switch over to MER, Madam Chair, do we want to take any questions on that?
Oh, yeah, no, it's up to you.
Another
Here we go.
acronym?
Yeah, there we go.
So you said there's tremendous demand. So what is the sort of waiting list right now for the projects and the funding? And what are the barriers to getting that money out to the people to do the rehabs?
Sure, and I may let Director Gilpin address that in more depth, but what I can say is because we have had a substantial amount of available funding, there hadn't been too much of a wait for folks. It was really a matter of how quickly could the nonprofits process these applications. Now we are starting to transfer from ARPA funds, and so we have to do a switch over where there's pause, and then we switch over to start using state general funds. So some of the nonprofits that are administering have had to pause because they spent down all their ARPA, and they're waiting now to start using general funds. But Sean, do you want to go into any more depth?
Sure, happy to. Again, for the record, Sean Gilpin, Director of Housing at Department of Housing and Community Development. The big, to get to your question, Senator, I think the pinch points, staff and contractors. And part of that is, so we rely heavily on the 5 homeownership centers, which cover the whole state. So Champlain Housing Trust in the Northwest, Rural Edge in the Kingdom, NeighborWorks of Western Vermont covers our West Coast, if you will, and Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust is aptly named. We work through those 5 outfits in order to, they actually do the work with the individual property owners on this project. I have a mighty staff of 2 permanent people and 3 limited service folks currently.
Wait, so can I just stop you right there?
Yeah.
So we have a housing crisis in Vermont and you have 2 people on your staff.
Correct.
Have you asked for any staff in the upcoming budget?
So, and I can touch on that. So over the years, we have often made efforts to seek an expansion or find ways to add capacity. And as you know, it's always challenging to get funding and what have you, but we're making an effort to make sure that in our programming, we build in admin dollars, because that's the way that we can sustain our staff. And so we're making an effort both in VAA and in the budget this year, specifically through VHIP, because that is such a critical program. We're making an effort to make sure admin is built in so that we can sustain staff, and some of these limited service folks could potentially become permanent.
Okay, so the short answer is yes, you are asking for additional staff in both the budget adjustment and the budget, yes.
So
Okay.
Yes.
So to Senator Hardy's point, what's the goal? What do you need? What is the staff?
VHIP is currently overseen, there's a primary point of contact, while the whole team works on VHIP in the housing division. The primary point of contact is a limited service employee whose position technically ends in September of 25, I believe, as of now. Now, the reason I gave a
It's
convoluted.
federally funded. You're
That's-
talking about the federal dollars being utilized
Exactly.
to increase staff to deploy federal funds.
That's
Right,
exactly
But we
right.
still have the other side of this equation, which is the need isn't going away.
It's not, and we
Yeah.
have a substantial amount of general funds now dedicated to that program, so there's still a need to administer that aspect, not to mention the compliance that now goes on for years after. So the reason we're seeking those admin dollars is so that that staff member who's done an incredible job administering VHIP can become a permanent state employee.
So how many part-time or limited term folks do you have on board? Like, what's the total number, not just the
3.
permanent number?
Well, 3 in the housing division,
Okay, 3 in the housing division, those are the limited term people as well?
they are,
Okay,
those
so
are,
3
yeah,
plus 3,
they're exactly 3 plus 3, so 3 permanent, 3 limited service.
and that's sufficient?
It's, if we were to go below that, it would be really hard to administer the programs.
I think we're all asking the same question.
Yeah.
We would always love more folks, but understand the confines. Now, that said, from my seat, overseeing the Department of Housing and Community Development, we're always thinking about which division might have a need for permanent folks that might be able to move over from one division to another.
Good.
Senator Williams.
So I'm probably gonna get out ahead of myself, but to Senator Hardy's point is that when you get your people, priority identified. I've been involved with 3 working groups in the city of Rutland, which affect the whole Rutland County. And one of the problems that I'm hearing from everybody is we need to streamline, we need to have somebody in maybe each housing group, or each county that's kind of a traffic cop. Okay, you need this, you can provide this is where you go to get it.
Navigator,
Huh?
like a navigator.
Yes, and that's the confusion. I heard one landlord who had 10 units that he had gone through VHIP, trying to get them online. And he finally got the application in after he figured out what he had to do. And then VHIP ran out of money. So this is the frustration. This guy had the contractors all laid on, he had the materials bought, and
And if I could respond to that and actually answer a follow-up to Senator Hardy's question. So one of the pinch points with this program is it has never been base funded. We've gotten one-time funds through, as Commissioner Farrell mentioned, originally the coronavirus relief funds, then ARPA. Now we're getting a one-time allocation of general funds. So that 2020 date that we put on there, that's not a linear, we've not been running the program in a linear fashion since 2020. It's had stops and starts because of both the funding constraints, but also each one of these, I know it sounds like, dollars should be fungible and it shouldn't matter, but each one of these programs has a different requirement. So we've basically been running VHIP we've been running 3 different VHIP programs over since 2020. And that has been, we're doing our best to make sure that from a client's perspective, it should look publicly the same. The back end is a challenge. And that's been really difficult. I'm excited about moving to general funds because we've been audited by the feds, we're getting audited by the state folks. If I could just talk to one auditor, that would be great. But yeah, that has been, and I have to give kudos to our small but mighty team has done a really great job trying to make the back end. But that
I wasn't finding fault.
Oh no.
I'm saying that when you go looking for people money.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice if there was one person in each county where they could go to help them navigate that. I understand that federal dollars have specific constraints with them, the rules change. And I understand you guys have been doing a good job dealing with that. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
But you guys aren't the ones who are doing the customer facing, it's the local housing agencies, right?
The home ownership centers, which is the 5 that I mentioned. And frankly, I don't want to speak for them necessarily. I'm sure they would all be happy to come in and talk about this program. It's been really, really helpful. It's also, I'm beyond just the capital investments. It has made connections between private landlords and homeless service providers that haven't happened before. So we've actually seen property owners who have become more engaged outside of the program, even in addressing some of the more vulnerable populations. So it's had a lot of great sort of pollinating effects on the network that we need in order to set up. But to your point, it would be great, whether it's the regional planning commissions, regional development councils, to be, I mean, if we had more permanent staff, we could have more sort of direct communication with those. But yes, the homeownership centers would probably be willing to dedicate staff if they knew that we had long-term funding other than just the, I mean, we've done our best trying to extend grant agreements as far out as we're allowed so that they can anticipate this, but I'm sure Melanie Paskovich at NeighborWorks of Western Vermont would be more than happy to have a full on staff.
Well, she's a player down there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there is a lot of confusion as far as the regional planning commission finally came up with an ad hoc working group, and they're kind of taking the lead, and all these players are participating, that's probably a good idea to do it that way.
Yeah, and oftentimes we do work, our department works a lot with the regional planning commissions because they oftentimes can play that role of that navigator and that's.
And they have, and Rutland has done that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This is good. Maybe you could move on to the home improvement repair program and then we
Yeah.
can, so we can get to DCF. This is a
Absolutely.
good discussion. This is the beginning of our discussion with this.
Well, we're happy.
We'll be back.
Good, yeah. So while we wait for the one pager to come up here, I can just share some of the background. So the manufactured home improvement and repair program is focused on reinvesting in our mobile home communities throughout the state. So this is an effort not only to make sure the units can come online, but really to help folks who are currently housed or precariously housed can stay in units and help stem the tide of those newly homeless folks. And so this program invests in multiple ways. It can go towards grants directly to unit owners for repairs so that they can hopefully stay in their unit for longer. It can go to infrastructure investment in the park to make sure the park is healthier and safer for the residents. It can focus on infill grants. This is where park owners can apply to place a new pad so a new unit can come into the park. There's a lot of ways that this is contributing to either growing the housing stock and or making sure it's healthier and stronger going forward. So again, just to highlight, this has been an incredibly cost-effective program. I mean, for literally pennies on the dollar relative to new construction, we're keeping people safely housed in good units, in parks, and trying to invest in these parks. So you can see over 200 projects have been approved in parks. That's just since March of 2023. This is one program that immediately demand blew through what the initial appropriation was. We're obviously fortunate to get to have another $4 million coming, through the agreement with VHCB. And we are confident that absolutely all of that and then some will certainly be demanded. But I just want to go back to the cost effectiveness. So the average award is $8,600 per project. So you can, based on the numbers that I said before, you can imagine how cost effective that is. The new mobile homes are not cheap. It's often, we talk about manufactured homes as though this is a really cheap option. It's not easy. When you're talking $130,000, $150,000 for a new home, especially for folks who maybe are choosing this because it's a more cost-effective method, that's still a tremendous barrier. Now, there are other programs operating through homeownership centers like Champlain Housing Trust to help folks with a down payment on those, but you're still taking on tremendous debt. And for some of these folks, they chose this option because they can't afford to finance. So a program like this is absolutely critical to keep people housed. So of the original appropriation, $2.4 million has been approved in applications. And just to talk about the spread in terms of addressing a statewide need, all 14 counties, 459 applications, and the requests have been 5.6 million. So it's really helping in all corners of the state. Sean, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just say that I think manufactured home communities are often overlooked. There's a stigma about them. They house a huge amount of people in this state and are really, as noted, relatively cost effective. If you're talking about, community development, ecological considerations. I mean, these are dense communities where people can start a family, where they can retire, where people are looking after each other. It really ought to be, frankly, in my opinion, and I admit that I'm biased. Prior to working with the department, I was at the CVOEO mobile home program for a number of years. It's really it's an overlooked asset. And I guess just one other thing that I'll point out, and this speaks to, again, sort of championing my crew and what we've been able to accomplish. Within 24 hours of opening up this program, we were able to approve and cut checks for 3 furnaces that had gone out that somebody would have been out of their homes. So that little tidbit about emergency awards typically approved in 3 business days is in my opinion, with my experience in the state, it's pretty incredible to be able to, turn things over that fast.
Did you allocate any funding for any of the flood emergencies? That'll come from FEMA. How did you interact with that? And I don't want to get too much down the pathway because I do want to hear from DCF, but maybe you could just short.
I can say real quickly
Yeah.
that we, so we have addressed, we did use this program to address some flood affected homes. Frankly, we set up a whole different, program through the governor's office to address mainly 3 parks that were severely hit. We had a lot of experience after Irene and funneled out close to $1.5 million in repairs, home removal, and basically shoring up what FEMA didn't show up for.
Yes, we've heard a lot about that. So thank you for doing what you've done. Good.
Just briefly, I got my start in a manufacturing home when I first got married. And, you know, they have a shelf life. And one of the things when the plan is being put together, there probably should be a deactivation plan for them, because eventually, being on a local municipal select board, we had 2 mobile home courts in our town that basically the person that ran it died, family didn't want to deal with it, and there were derelict manufactured homes on site. The sites are still there, but the town ended up taking them over because people walked away from them.
Yeah.
So because of the tax burden.
Yeah.
So maybe somebody should consider how we're gonna deactivate these. If it's gonna be up to the municipality, then maybe some funding should be allocated for them to be able to do it. Just a thought.
Fair enough. And part of this program can be used to remove abandoned homes from lots to make them reusable again, because walking away is, you know, unfortunately, I wouldn't say it's frequent, but it's not uncommon.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I could just one quick
Yeah, no, go
question,
ahead.
since we got the experts in the room. So, the balance between VHIP and the manufactured home repair program, is that legislated that way, that, or who, where decides how money is allocated towards mobile home repair versus VHIP, you know?
Yeah, so they're 2 completely independent programs that we seek independent appropriations for. And we've received substantially more for VHIP and it's been run longer, but MER was sort of a complementary thing that we saw as an opportunity that wasn't being met.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
And we're gonna have a new manufactured home facility in our district.
Oh, you get all the business in Rome.
No, we don't. But it used to manufacture homes and they went away.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
And now they're out there thinking about coming back.
Well, there's a lot of opportunity there.
This is helpful. Now, one of the things I'll probably ask Commissioner Winters or Deputy Commissioner Gray the question about the interaction that you have between the 2 organizations. So why don't we move to DCF, just because of our time. We're on the floor at 11:30 today, so we only have like 15 more minutes.
And actually, Madam Chair, I
You have to go.
hope it's not rude. We have to get up to House General and Housing
Okay.
because they're expecting us now.
All right, well, this is
Thank
good.
you.
I appreciate your
Thank you all
time.
very much.
You will be back in probably with us and maybe a bigger group, so thank you.
Great,
Good
yeah.
start.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much.
I'll try not to hurt you as I get up there.
Good luck.
All right, terrific.
So crowded in here.
Good morning.
Good morning,
morning.
welcome.
Thank you.
Is
And
this the first time this year?
this
right?
is the first time
Yeah.
this year.
Good. Well, we did have you in the fall, but that was a different meeting, so. Why don't you introduce yourself for the record and then we'll listen.
Great. Thank you. For the record, Chris Winters, Commissioner of the Department for Children and Families, and joining me today is Deputy Commissioner Miranda Gray, behind Senator Hardy over there. And also in the room with us today, Nellie Marble, our Director of Legislative and Communications. Nellie is brand new to the position this year and familiar to a few of you on this committee, I believe.
We know, I know.
And also joining us from the Economic Services Department is Monica Medeiros.
Okay.
Knowing how much of a priority housing and the GA housing program is going to be for you all, for us, of course, this year in the legislature. Monica has been reassigned in the position as a legislative lead for the Economic Services Department, so you'll see her face in here as well. I appreciate the committee taking testimony from Commissioner Farrell first. We're making a concerted effort to join housing and homelessness in everything we do. You know, so there's the new Governor's Council on Housing and Homelessness, and one of the most effective things we can do to address unsheltered folks in this state is to create more housing units and create more affordable housing units in particular. So we'll be appearing as a team. I'm going to follow him up to House General as soon as I'm done here. And as you folks all know, DCF serves as the safety net, as the last resort. And we do not create housing units. We do provide emergency shelter as a safety net, and we try to help as many people as we possibly can in their time of need. But one of the most important things we can do, is to address the housing crisis in general, because you really see that tie in states where housing is unaffordable or there are very low vacancy rates. You see higher rates of homelessness. So we want to keep that top of mind. And meanwhile, you know, I think you all know very well in this committee that at AHS and within DCF, we've been working really hard to address and prevent unsheltered homelessness in a variety of ways. There's no one easy answer. It's been really a multi-pronged approach to trying to expand shelter beds, to operate new emergency overnight shelters, provide transitional housing, do rapid rehousing. Both our Economic Services Department and our Office of Economic Opportunity are working with community partners in this population every single day to try to get people to more permanent situations for their housing. I know you don't have a lot of time, so I think, you know, maybe we'll jump into the presentation, and with your permission, I may ask for an assist from the Deputy Commissioner from her seat over there, unless you'd rather have her come
If you would
up
like
here.
to both be together, just bring a chair over.
Okay.
If you want to bring a chair over, yeah.
You have the presentation up already? Excellent. Thank you so much. This in particular is talking about Act 81 and the June cohort, the folks who are still sheltered in hotels and motels across the state. We have approximately 684 households still in the program. And as you can see there, we started with 1,289 as of June 30, and what we refer to as the June cohort. And with Act 81, their stay there is scheduled to expire on April 1st. We currently have 684 there. We'll have a further breakdown in this presentation of what we know about those folks. And you can see that 607 of the households transitioned out since June 30th. And we're working, you know, as hard as we can, connecting those people to the services that they need and to other housing options. And I turn to Deputy Commissioner Gray for a minute here. We saw a fairly steady exit over the first few months after June 30th, but that number is slowing down. And we do find it very difficult to find a place to move people to. It's not as though they don't have vouchers. It's not as though some of them don't have some form of income where they could move into an affordable housing situation, but they just can't find the units. I don't know if you want to say anything else about that, Miranda.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add is that we are experiencing that some of the households we're working with have significant barriers to being able to get into housing. Perhaps they have a background issue that we weren't able to resolve, or some people need higher levels of care. They really need nursing home level of care or assisted living. And there's also barriers there that we're trying to work through.
And so going to Senator Williams' question regarding navigators and helping folks find affordable housing. So the linkage between you and Alex Farrell and his folks, how is that all sugaring off?
Yes, we, through Act 81, also received funding. So we have panel managers, which are overseen by our field service directors. And so those are the people that are trying to help those in the cohort make these connections. I think there are still lengthy processes and some things that, like, some criminal records that you are not going to get into affordable housing. And so those are the barriers that we're facing.
Yeah.
Is how do you find something that someone can afford, in a climate where rent really isn't affordable without being able to secure a voucher, but then there is just a sheer lack of availability. But we
And
are.
specific types of housing for, yeah.
Yeah.
And we do have weekly meetings with ACCD, in particular Alex's team, and we stay in regular contact. We're going to do joint testimony. We have the Governor's Council on Housing and Homelessness, which has, two parts to it. One is unit generation and the other is homelessness prevention. So we're very much linked in all of the work that we're doing to try to address homelessness. The last piece on this slide is you see the average nightly rate for the hotels and motels, and I know this will come up many times when we're talking about the budget and how expensive it is right now to house folks in hotels and motels. We have been trying to negotiate rates down. We're getting more aggressive in that in recent weeks. But quite frankly, we're using 1,600 or so hotel rooms right now. And with regional capacity being mostly full, it's very hard to negotiate with someone who knows that you really need those hotel rooms, and that the alternative is to put people out on the street. So I'll just say that those negotiations continue. We're trying to press that nightly rate down as we speak. And I'll also just mention we've engaged BGS in doing some of that negotiation. We were doing it ourselves, but now that BGS involved.
They also supposedly, if they have 30% of their income is supposed to go towards that. But do we know how many people are actually employed? Do we have some?
We do have a significant number of households that are employed, and I could look to get that number for you, or have social security income. And so people are paying anywhere from a night to 3 nights because it's based on where you're staying and what the state is paying for that hotel room. So people are asked to contribute. So if I were to show you our numbers that we posted this week, because we have a website where we post our data every week, you would see a dip, and you might think like, oh, people have transitioned, but really what it is people are self-paying for their hotel nights, and so next week we will see those numbers increase.
So who keeps track of who's actually physically in the room? Because I heard some stories about people that had died, they'd gone to the hospital, and the room was vacant, but so we were looking for rooms, but there were rooms that were empty. Did you ever hear any of that?
I certainly know that we have had people that have passed away,
Right.
and we do, because we have kennel managers who are going into motels. I've had staff members at various times, we have field service directors, and so we try to and handle on who's there and what rooms we're paying for. This is where we spend a lot of time, because it's by individual, by room. So hopefully that's few and far between, but I invite you, if you ever hear something specific, to send it to me, and I would certainly.
But you don't have anybody specifically looking at each hotel to make sure that the rooms are being used properly?
I think it's a mixed bag, and one of the challenges of sort of outsourcing your shelter system to a private company that runs a hotel is that you don't necessarily have all the oversight and connection and understanding of who's there. We are trying to make those connections with the panel managers and through the General Assistance Housing Program to kind of know what the numbers are, and the hotels have to prove to us that they're using the rooms, but it's definitely an imperfect system that's kind of with the state with a half a foot in the door.
Yeah, it goes back to, it gets to the contract relationship that you have with the hotel, and we've talked about that in the past. Go ahead, Cindy.
Thanks for this update, you guys. I'm wondering about 2 things. One that I think I asked about at the meeting in October, which is the paperwork. That is a continued kind of complaint that we've heard from people, is the lengthy paperwork that people have to fill out. And then the second is the level of high needs, which you both referred to, of some of the individuals in the program or in the emergency housing that's not part of the June cohort, because there's this other separate group of people who are still being housed in hotels that have really high needs that really should be in long-term care facilities. So you're working with Commissioner Farrell. Are you also, I assume, working with Dale to try to find long-term care placements for some of these people?
Yes. The short
And
answer is
how's
yes.
that going?
That was a yes or no?
Basically, what I'm hearing is it's not going well, so is, what?
Yeah, so you'll see, I'm not sure we'll get to it, I think it's toward the end of this presentation. Actually, it's the last page on residential capacity and sort of the availability from other departments in AHS of mental health treatment beds, intensive residential treatment beds, recovery housing, DOC, Department of Corrections, transitional housing, and, you know, with Dale, skilled nursing facility beds, and there are some availabilities there, but the problem is often kind of matching those up. But we are speaking with of course, with the Dale commissioner, and Dale itself, and trying to figure out how we match people to those beds, but there's not huge capacity in any one of those areas.
Okay, and what about the paperwork?
I think the paperwork, if, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the housing applications themselves, not necessarily the paperwork.
The folks who don't have a place to live, who are making applications and have to go around and get all the information from different places and put it together. We've heard
Yeah, I
that
think
it's a huge problem.
Yeah, a combination of the housing applications, and then there are also other applications.
Yeah.
People have to fill out Medicaid and, food stamp, all of the applications for assistance. And, whether or not there could be some kind of centralization of the paperwork.
Or care management, and then there are some timelines that were problematic in
Yeah.
terms of, you have to have it in within, I forget what the timeline, 10 days, which was very significant for folks who don't have mobility or in one way or another. Yeah. So we should talk about that at some point. We'll have to get some.
Yeah, we're happy to do that. And I will say that the Council on Housing and Homelessness, one of the recommendations, and those recommendations are not public yet, but one of them will be a coordinated housing application and use of technology. The coordinated entry system has helped, but there's still a long ways to go. I know there are some groups that are piloting a common housing application that I think would actually, I think it's to your point, like, how do we simplify this and put it into one place?
Yeah, especially for people whose lives are disrupted for a variety of reasons. And as Senator Lyons mentioned, if they miss a deadline, then they have to sort of go back to square one. And it's really, really difficult when your life is a little bit chaotic.
Sure.
So an update on that. I mean, we asked about it in October, but it sounds like things are happening. So, but that's an interest of ours, I think, going forward. Certainly, yeah.
So if we could go to the next slide, we'll start to give you a little bit of data about the cohort, what we know from our engagements with the folks here. Households by district. You can see that, I'm not sure that's quite reflected right here, but we know that Central Vermont, Barry looks a little bit low here, but Central Vermont, Bennington, Brattleboro, Burlington, and Rutland are the 5 areas where there are the most folks housed in the cohort. And so that's where we're going to focus our attention for April 1st in the transition. But you can see here kind of total eligible households, those who are in the cohort, those are in non-cohort households. So those might be folks who are there as a vulnerable population or catastrophic, vulnerable for 28 days, catastrophic for 84, or in the adverse weather conditions right now where we are from December 15th to March 15th. And the numbers overall, I think we're somewhere up around 1,600 hotel rooms in use now.
What is cohort?
Sorry.
Is it an acronym or?
No, it's not. It's the group of people who were still in our hotels as of June 30th, and the legislature decided to extend that for another several months to April 1st. That was the Act 81 last year.
Okay.
Next is the eligibility category of households. So to give you a little bit of demographic information about, as we talked about the population, those who are 60 or older, those who are disabled, meaning they're on SSI or SSDI is our definition of disabled here. Those who may be fleeing domestic violence, families with children, health code violations, so eviction from their place of housing, natural disaster, fire, flood, or hurricane, or pregnant. And so that's of the cohort of that group, as of June 30th, these are some of the categories that they fall into.
The people who are disabled, that's really.
And the next households in the 630 cohort by size. This just gives you a sense for how many in which regions have larger households, families with children, adults and children.
Can I just add, I think we're using this to help us with that connection to DHCD about like what size units do we need to be thinking about bringing online. So it's not rather large ones, we need a lot of single occupancy units really.
So as you're working with different municipalities, each one has a different investment. So I know Burlington has invested very heavily in affordable housing and have like Rutland and other municipalities similarly invested in not just building, but also providing infrastructure support, administrative support. And are you working with them?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Farrell and Sean could probably speak more to that, but it really is different region by region.
Yeah, it is.
I've heard them talk, and I'm no expert in this, but that Rutland has a lot of older housing stock that can be rehabbed through the VHIP program, and they're really focusing on that program in the Rutland area, and Chittenden County is different, but it really is a different strategy depending on the region.
Yeah, so, and these are interests of our Economic Development Committee, and so we'll also have that interest, but how to blend what DCF is doing with what is happening there, and how to bring local folks and state folks together. So
That's right.
what do we need to do to make this a more permanent, systematic approach? And then what do we need if and when we have our next emergency? Not if, but when we have our next emergency. So those are that's the next iteration of thought, I think.
I think that's right.
Yeah, okay.
Next is the cohort exit reasons. So just to give you a sense for, of those 1,200 plus folks who were in on 630, about half of them have exited. This is what we know, a number of people leave and we never hear from them again. So we don't know if they found housing, if they moved out of state, if, what did happen to them. But those that we know about, 222, just a few highlights here, 222 actually found housing. Some just decided not to renew. Maybe they didn't want to, comply with the new requirements, or who knows why, but they didn't renew. They may have joined another household or left the cohort. You do see that, given the number of older people and people with serious health issues, we have had 13 folks die while in the hotel motel program. There's a number here of exited by the motel for misconduct. We will work with them to put them in another hotel, but that doesn't always work. So exited for misconduct. I think those are the significant numbers on this page.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add is that anyone that was exited from the cohort was eligible for our regular GA program. So a lot of them transitioned into that for either their 20 or 84 days, and now could be with us under adverse weather conditions.
And I know that the House is working on a GA bill, comprehensive, to update that program. And so we'll be looking at that as well.
That's right. Good time. Next is just to say a few things about screening and care management. We have these cross-departmental teams that we're working with households going back to October of 2022 to try to connect people to the services they need and help them move to more permanent situations. Many of those that we originally screened with shared care plans are no longer in the system, but, so people, it is a moving population, people coming in and people going out. We more recently this summer contracted with Rescue Inc. and started screening clients in July 19th, so we could make sure that we got everybody screened. And then even more recently, a contract went in effect to fully staff care management statewide. So we are, the bottom line is working within the hotels and motels to try to connect with all the people who are there, screen them, give them care management, connect them to potential housing situations.
Let's ask the question about how many more people do you need to help make that happen efficiently?
I think we have the budget for it, it's been a difficulty in finding the workforce to do it. And so you can see we've kind of changed gears a few different times to try to get the folks that we need into the hotels to make the connections.
It's Friday and we're on the floor at
Yeah.
11:30.
Got saved by the bell.
We'll have you back one way or another, and we so appreciate you taking the time to be here. And it's nice to have both you and, the Department of Housing in at the same time. That's good. Again, thank you.
Appreciate